Photoshop Basics for Scrapbooking class. In today's video, we are going to take what we have learned the last 2 weeks in terms of the basic editing functions for photography, and we're going to go even further down the rabbit hole. Today is going to be the first of a couple lessons where we're going to talk about some advanced photo editing options that you have inside of both Photoshop Creative Cloud and Photoshop Elements. Today specifically, we're going to focus on one of my favorite things when it comes to editing photos, and that is the Camera Raw filter. Both of the programs have this filter, which helps to do a lot of the edits that really are available to you in other places inside of the programs as well. But for me, I love the Camera Raw filter because it has everything I could possibly need all in one place to get my photos edited and looking the way I want. So let's head over to my computer and let me show you the Camera Raw filter. All right, friends, we're going to get today started inside of Photoshop Creative Cloud. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is pull open a photo. So let's go into our lesson for today, and let's work with this photo here of Jonah on the couch. Now, one of the things you might notice right at the beginning is that this photo is a little bit hazy looking. It's a little out of focus. I took this on portrait mode, and it's a really cute picture, but it needs to be sharpened up a little bit. Now, at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and do my basic photo edits that we talked about a couple weeks back. So I'm going to increase that brightness and contrast, and I will also go ahead and merge these two pieces together. Now, once I have the brightness and contrast increased, now I'm going to open up this photo inside of the Camera Raw filter. So I'm going to go up to the filter menu here and down to Camera Raw filter. Now, you can also get to this using a short key of Shift Control A or Shift Command A. So let's click that and get this open. Now, this is going to open up my photo into a completely separate screen here. And you can see the photo is in the center, and then there's a whole bunch of editing stuff here on the right hand side. So this is what we're going to be using to do some more intricate types of editing or adjustments onto the photo itself. So we have already increased the brightness and contrast, but here we've got a couple of other functions that I go again and again and again to use. The first one is probably the most game-changing tool of them all. This one is the white balance tool, which looks like a little eyedropper. Now, if you actually cannot see this menu, it's possible that you don't have it opened up. So you can see there's basic, curve, detail, color mixer, color gradient, blah, 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 tons of them. You just need to click on the arrow next to basic, and it's going to open up the rest of the functions. In here, there is the white balance little eyedropper. If you click on it, then it changes your mouse to the eyedropper instead of the zoom lens. So we're going to click on that. Now, the way that the white balance tool works is you are going to select in your picture something that is pure white, something that you would consider to be the whitest point or the truest white point on your photo. For me, that might be Jonah's shirt, which is yellow and white striped. So I'm going to click inside of his shirt here on the white, and it's going to adjust all the rest of the colors in my photo to reflect that this is white. So the adjustments are going to, in this case, make my photo a little bit bluer and also a little bit more purple. So this is a really quick way to adjust your photos so that the lighting is truer to what you're actually seeing versus what the camera picked up when you took your shot. So that is, if you take nothing else away from this, this is the tool that changed my life, the white balance tool. Okay, so in addition to the white balance tool, there are also a variety of features down here, a variety of adjustments you can make down here at the bottom. The first being exposure. So exposure here is the same as exposure on the menu, the quick edit menu here in the main section. You can increase this up to increase your exposure or down to decrease your exposure. For now, I'm going to keep this at 0 because I think that's totally fine. You can also increase the contrast just like we did before. And then you see highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So for highlights, if you increase it up, it's going to increase the amount of highlighting that's happening around some of these brighter areas. In the same stroke, if you go all the way down, it's going to remove some of the highlighting that's happening in the brighter spots in the picture. So for example, in this one, here's a good example. Here, back here at the window, you can see that it's really super bright when I increase the highlights, or it goes down and you can see more definition of my wall back there when the highlights are down. I generally don't adjust the highlights. I'm going to get it back to 0. I don't adjust the highlights very often. In fact, it's really, really rare that I would do highlights or shadows. Shadows is going to be the same thing but opposite. So if you increase the shadows, it's going to brighten everything up and take away a lot of that shadowing. If you go back, or if you bring this down to the bottom, it's going to increase the amount of shadow or the darker areas of your photo. Again, I keep this one at 0 usually. For the whites, when you increase the whites, it's going to take anything that's white in your picture and expose that a little bit more, or if you go down, it's going to dull out some of the white. Let's undo that one. And then the blacks is the same thing. If you increase the blacks, it's going to, or increase the slider on the blacks bar, it's going to remove a lot of the darker parts of your photo. And if you bring it down, it's going to increase anywhere where there is black. It's going to add more black into that section of your photo. For the most part, I usually only adjust my exposure slightly when I need to. Otherwise, I keep everything here where it's at. There could be a time when I might want to increase or add additional black into my photo. Like this one could probably use it because it's so hazy, but another edit that we're going to do down here is actually going to take care of a lot of that. Texture is one that I don't really use very often. When you increase this up, it does highlight more of the texture in, like here you can see it in this pillow. And in my son's face, it makes him look almost a little bit pixelated. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom, it softens everything up, which is not really the look I'm going for here, right? So we'll put that back. The next two here, clarity and dehaze, are both edits that I make on almost every single photo that I take or that I'm going to use. Clarity is going to help create exactly what it says, clarity to your picture. So it does, if you go all the way up, it does kind of create some pixelization, some blotchiness on my photo. But if I just increase it a little bit, it's going to add more definition into my photo and help out with the fuzziness, because this photo ended up being a little bit on the fuzzy side. In the same way, I'm going to move this down even a little bit more. In the same way, the dehaze is going to take some of the colors here and saturate them, especially those darks, and saturate them a little bit more. So it takes away the haziness of the photo. You can see it happening around especially the edges of the photo. So if we go all the way down, it really dulls out a lot of the edges, and if we go all the way up, then it's going to make things really dark around the outside of the photo. So for this one, I'm going to increase it up a little bit to help saturate those colors back again and make it seem not so hazy. I've got the clarity up a little bit. From here, I might want to do some exposure just slightly, like maybe 0.1. And then the last two down here, vibrance and saturation, are both for colors. When you use the vibrance for the slider, it's going to take your colors and make them almost more neon-like as you go up. As you go down, it makes them really dull. And then saturation is taking the color that's already on the page and increasing that. It's generally going to add in some more yellow. And then when you go down, it takes away all the color saturation, and your photo is now black and white. So for this one, I usually increase my saturation just slightly because I want the colors to be a bit more vibrant than they are on the photo. So those are generally the more fine-tuned edits that I am making to my photos, is primarily the white balance tool, followed by clarity, dehaze, saturation, and then exposure if I want to. There are additional fine-tuning types of edits that you can make. This is that curves that we talked about before, so you can use this on here to create curves. I generally don't use that one. We've also got some details, so sharpening, noise reduction, color noise reduction, color mixing, where you can increase or decrease certain colors in your layout. So I might want to make those yellows a bit more green, right? So this is where you can start to change some of the colors in your photo. There's color grading, which I don't use, so I can't really speak on that too much. We've got distortion, and we've got optics here, which I don't like. None of this I use. Geometry I don't use. Effects I don't use. And calibration, I also don't usually use it. But this is another place where you can go to adjust some of your colors. So we've got shadows, red primary, green primary, blue primary, so we can adjust these to create some differences in the colors, right? Yes. So that is the Camera Raw filter. Generally, everything I'm doing is in the Basics tab, but feel free to play around with all those other pieces and see if anything floats your boat in there. This down here at the bottom allows you to cycle in between the old and the new photo. So this one right here that's half dark and half light, if you click on that one, then it takes your photo. So right now this is the original, and that is my edited. Original and edited. And that's because I've got the box on here that has the full box. If I were to click on this one, then you can see the before and the after. Here we go, the before and the after, which there is a really significant difference. This photo is so much more yellow than this one. This has a lot more of those blue tones, and because of the white balance tool, that's really what made the biggest difference there. And then you can see that it looks a little bit sharper in this image than it does on the right hand side. So once I am happy with this, let's get back to where we started. Whoops. Get me back to where I started. There we go. So once I am happy with my photo here, I can click the OK button, and it's going to make those adjustments to my photo on my main screen, and I can go ahead and save this as a new version of the photo. I will also mention that all of those adjustments went directly onto the photo, so they did not become extra layers inside of your layers panel. As soon as I clicked OK and I came back here, then the whole photo is the way that it is. Something else I will mention is if you're working on a photo, and let's say we create an adjustment layer and we've got the brightness and contrast. If you do not have these merged and you are selected on the brightness and contrast filter or adjustment here, and then you go to Camera Raw filter, when you open it up, you're going to get a white screen because it's literally opening up that that layer, right? Which is not what we're looking for here. Versus if I were to select the background layer and open that up, you know, just so you can see, let's do this. So let's increase the brightness. So this is definitely different, right? So if I have the background selected and I open this up inside of Camera Raw Filter, it's going to open up the background photo without the adjustment on it. So if you want to open up the photo that you have adjusted, you are going to need to merge your layers together first so it becomes one piece, and then open this up inside of the Camera Raw Filter. And then it will be the same photo. So just something that you might run into as you're working with the Camera Raw Filter. All right, so let's go over to Photoshop Elements and show you the same process over here. The biggest difference between Photoshop Elements and Photoshop Creative Cloud as it pertains to the Camera Raw Filter is the way that you have to open your photos. So instead of opening up a photo inside of Photoshop Elements, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to go up to File and Open in Camera Raw, which is in the File menu. Then it's going to bring up the photos that you can select from. So I'm going to select the same photo we just worked with, and we're going to open that up. When we open it up, it's going to open up in that sub-menu, just like it did before. And we have the photo in the middle, the adjustments on the right-hand side. So this is going to look very similar to the Photoshop Creative Cloud. We still have our white balance tool, which I'll go ahead and adjust that. We still have the exposure, the contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. We still have the clarity, but one of the pieces that we're missing, I'm just going to double check myself here. Yes, one of the pieces that we're missing inside of Elements is the dehaze option. There is this sharpening, so we can use that kind of like we would use dehaze, but it's not quite as robust. So we can increase the clarity, we can increase the sharpening, which is inside of the detail menu, and then we've also got the vibrance and saturation. So I can still add in some saturation to make those colors a little bit more vibrant, and I can also increase my exposure a little bit to get this where I want it to be. So then, now that I'm happy with the way that looks, we're going to now hit open at the bottom. So this is going to apply the changes and then open this photo inside of Photoshop Elements. From here, we can then go into our brightness and contrast, and we can work to get those adjustments made as well. Like I might need to up my contrast quite a bit to get this a little bit crisper as a look. Okay, so I like the way that that is. I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers together. So this is one file here, and that, friends, is the Camera Raw Filter inside of Photoshop Elements. So a couple of differences here is that you have to open your photo inside of the Camera Raw Filter inside of Photoshop Elements. So let's pretend that this, well, that's, I guess we don't have to pretend. We have this photo open currently in Elements. If I were to go to File and then Open in Camera Raw, it's no matter what going to ask me to open up a photo. So if I select the same one again, it's not going to do anything because that photo is already open inside of Photoshop Elements. So it cannot be open here. You have to go from the very beginning and open it up in Camera Raw Filter first. Okay, and then it opens up inside of Elements. So I hope that that makes sense. And then also just keep in mind that you're not going to be able to find the dehaze function inside of this Camera Raw Filter here on Elements. Oh, when we talked a couple weeks ago about the basic edits for the photo, this is my workaround for exposure, because the main portion of Photoshop Elements does not have an adjustment for exposure. If you want to increase your exposure, and that's like the metric you want to use, you can always find that inside of this Camera Raw Filter here. So there is the exposure right there at the top, and you can adjust it from here. All right, friends, that is the Camera Raw filter. If you have any questions on it, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will do my best to try and answer them. I hope this lesson has been valuable for you. I hope you have learned something new. For homework this week, I would love for you to play around with the Camera Raw filter. Whichever program you have, open up some photos inside of the program and play around with the settings so you can get a really good feel for how those different adjustments work on the photos themselves. I'll be back next week with another lesson on advanced editing techniques. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in next week's videos. Bye, friends.